Every year, millions of people fly across time zones, work through the night in hospitals, or wake up in the dark of winter feeling like their body just will not cooperate. For over 15 years, a device out of Finland has been trying to fix that problem, not with pills or screens, but with light delivered straight through the ear canal. Today, we're looking at how that idea is making its way into the American market. Welcome to the Practice Pulse, the podcast where we go inside businesses and ideas shaping health, wellness, and longevity. I'm your host, Nancy Margrit, founder of Optima Pro AI. And on this show, we talk with the founders, clinicians, and operators building smarter systems and better outcomes in this space. My guest today is Gary Miller, owner of Human Charger US. Gary spent decades as a coach in elite ski racing, including work with the US ski team, before he shifted his focus to circadian science and human performance. He now leads the U.S. market introduction of Human Charger, a bright light therapy headset with more than 15 years of history in Europe and over 100,000 units sold worldwide. Gary, welcome to the Practice Pulse, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Awesome. So I'd love to get started with the origin of this product because it's not a typical Silicon Valley story. Human Charger started in northern Finland back in 2007, and it was built by a scientist and an engineer working with researchers. Can you walk us through that origin story and then how you personally ended up leading this introduction into the U.S.?
Sure. Yeah, this is an interesting story. This goes back to a company that we were all familiar with back in the day, which is Nokia. I mean, Everybody before iPhones and the Samsungs and things like that, everyone had a Nokia phone. And all of a sudden, they sort of fell out of favor when the iPhone showed up. They became sort of a has-been and they were caught a little bit with their pants down, didn't know where they were going. And there was an engineer and a scientist from Nokia that wanted to solve a pervasive problem in Finland, which, at their latitude has very long, dark winters. So there was a lot of seasonal affective disorder, a lot of SAD. And these guys wanted to come up with something that was better than a traditional SAD lamp, which is something you would stare at for an hour to activate your brain chemicals, your hormones to kickstart your circadian rhythm, your body's biological clock. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, which we'll get into a little bit later. But these guys thought, okay, there's got to be a better way. So they started doing some experiments and they found that actually light will penetrate the skull. So it can get to the brain without having to go through the optic nerve. And, one thing led to another. And pretty soon they discovered that transcranial bright light, which would be through the ear canal, is much more efficient and much more effective and much easier to do than staring at a lamp. And they took the same basic light source. They use 10,000 lux, the same as a powerful SAD lamp, 10,000 lux of bright, full spectrum light, UV free, and it goes through the eardrum because the eardrum is translucent. The bone structure around your ear canal is very thin, so that it was able to activate these hormones and your biological clock so much quicker. So instead of staring at a lamp for an hour, you can put this around your neck, hit the button, and put it in your ears for 12 minutes. And then it automatically shuts off, and that does the trick. So that's kind of how these guys, and they took a lot of money from Nokia, and they did all the research, they did the case studies, they tested it on the Finnish pro hockey players, and because if you're in an arena, you're maybe getting 1,200 to 1,500 lux of light, which really isn't optimum for sports performance. It's not like you're outside and you can get 100,000 lux on a sunny day or even 10 or 15,000 lux on a cloudy day. So they did a lot of research. They did a lot of studies, and that's kind of where it came from, which is crazy. And
Yeah.
my wife and I just happened to be in Austria. It was, it was almost 2 years ago on a ski trip with some
Hmm.
friends, and I ran into an old business colleague of mine from Germany. And he introduced me to his friend who had just purchased the company from the scientist and the engineer who had originally, it was called Valky back then.
Hmm.
And he explained what it was. And I didn't know anything about seasonal affective disorder. My wife did, for sure. And she knew right away. And she said, "Oh my God, that would be fantastic."
Right.
And the more I looked at it, I started looking at it from a sports perspective. Okay. Because I know what it's like to be a competitor and a coach and see what it's like on a sunny day. Everyone's happy and you can see everything and everything's great. You know, those days when you wake up and it's really cloudy or it's fogged in or there's snow coming down, you don't have much light and you never feel as sharp as you would on a sunny day. So
Yeah.
I thought,
It's true.
okay, right?
Yeah.
So one
So
thing led to another, and all of a sudden we're like, okay. But they said, we've never really done anything with the US market.
so what kind of told you that now is the time to introduce this into the US market?
Well, listen, I've been fortunate. I've been able to travel all over the world since I was 15 years old. Whether it's a competitor, a coach, I've done some filming. I used to do business in Asia, building products, sports products, and so I've been fortunate to see the way other countries, have evolved and how some are advanced more than others. And Americans are generally they're a little more, I guess, reserved when it comes to stuff like this.
Hmm.
And they're still using sad lamps. I mean, that business is fairly robust. I mean, it's 500 plus million a year and growing at 6 to 8%, which to me is astounding because when you have something that's as simple and easy as this, that's affordable, why wouldn't you use that? So it was like, okay, America's a little bit behind on this one. So let's see if we can't bring something that's a better, more effective technology to the Americans. And of course, you know, then we start getting into some of the other facets of it. It's sports performance. I mean, other than Finnish hockey players, nobody's really gone after that market. Jet lag, huge market. And they were rumors that it worked for jet lag, but until we started testing it on coaches, athletes, business executives, we had no idea that it was as good as it is. So, and then it sort of blossomed from there, really.
Very cool. And you've mentioned kind of in our intro call, you even mentioned another demographic, but you've mentioned several very different groups, business travelers or athletes dealing with jet lag, night shift healthcare workers is one that you mentioned in our intro call. And then, like we were just talking about, people managing seasonal affective disorder or SAD. So, what do these groups have in common that made you confident that one device could serve all of them?
Well, they crisscross a little bit. Okay,
Hmm.
so let's take seasonal affective disorder. I mean, that's the biggie, really, at this point, because people know they have this sort of disorder, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be whether they're living in Seattle or Portland, Maine, or something in the middle of winter, right? It's anything from what we call the old Mason-Dixon line north. People are going to be suffering some type of seasonal depression because when September hits and the days start getting shorter, and then it's a little bit of a double whammy at the end of October when the clocks change back again, and then all of a sudden it is dark. So you've got that September through February season where people just aren't running on peak efficiency. It's not, I mean, you know what it's like. It's summer, it's warm, it's lights the bright, you get plenty of sunlight and you can stay up till 10 o'clock at night. I mean, everything's just hunky dory, right? Wintertime, not so much.
No.
It's just the way it is. So, and everything, I guess to back up a little bit, think about when 40 years ago, before computers, smartphones, all this other stuff, we basically woke up with the sun, went to bed at night when it got dark, right? Most people read books because I know when I was growing up, you had 3 TV channels and they all were horrible. So you didn't watch TV. You didn't have all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
So, that was normal. And, jet travel, that's only 40, 50 years old.
Mhm.
That hasn't been around very long. So we know as human beings, if we look back to the early 1900s or the late 1800s, we've evolved as human beings. Our looks have changed, things like that. But chemically and biologically, we haven't changed a whole lot. So now all of a sudden, you jump on a tube and sail and fly across the Atlantic and, and in 6 hours, 7 hours, and you land at 6 or 7 time zones away, your body can adjust. We haven't evolved that fast. Okay.
Yeah.
You give kids smartphones today and they're hiding under the sheets at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, looking at doom scrolling themselves to death, and then they wonder why they're falling asleep in class and they're feeling depressed. I mean, all of this stuff has sort of come out of it's come very rapidly. And the technology has exceeded what we as human beings require when it comes to light. Our internal clock, our biological clock operates on light. Those are the cues. And there's nothing you can do to change it. I mean, people try to change it with taking melatonin at night to go to sleep. It's a hormone. It's not something you want to keep taking.
No.
Your body does it naturally. So we've had to kind of be a little bit clever. I always tell people that right now we're running 21st century software on a 1,000-year-old operating system. It just isn't efficient. So we've got to be a little bit clever. So that being said, to answer your question, you get into seasonal depression. Again, it's light, right?
Mhm.
Now, you get to April, May, June, July through the summer, people don't need as much light. There are days when I don't use the human charger because if it's bright and sunny and I get out early in the morning to exercise, I get enough light to be able to kickstart my engine. Okay. But if it's, you get a few cloudy days in a row, all of a sudden you're starting to go, not quite there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you roll that into take shift workers, for example, and there's a gazillion shift workers.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
nurses, EMTs, military, police, nurses, doctors, warehouse workers, night traders. I mean, it runs the gamut. There are so
Mhm.
many people today in our 24/7 society that are working the night shift. The body, again, was not designed to operate in the night shift. If you go back 40, 50 years ago, there weren't that many people working the night shift.
Yeah.
So now they're trying to change their biological clock, but it doesn't happen naturally because you're going to go, nurses will go to work and yeah, they're under bright lights in a hospital or a clinic, but that still doesn't mean that you can keep things going. Your circadian rhythm can't keep up with that. So in a case like that, you would use the human charger every couple hours the first 2 days that you're working the night shift. By what that's done is that's just advanced your circadian rhythm. So when you go home at 6 in the morning and you go to bed, you sleep through the day.
Mhm.
And then when you're off on the weekend, you just reverse it. And then you use the human charger on the Saturday and Sunday if it was standard 5-day work week, and then you're off for 2 days. But that's how you sort of trick it. Okay. You add jet lag into it. Okay. The only way that you can get your head into the new time zone, because your body still thinks it's in New York, it doesn't think it's in Munich. The only way you can do that is advance your biological clock. So you're going to give it light every 2 hours for the first 2 days you arrive. And it'll be 8 in the morning, 10, 12, 2, and maybe even 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's just slowly advancing
Mhm.
because if, anybody that has traveled from Chicago, New York, wherever, to Munich or Paris, they're going to feel off for 2 or 3 days. Some people 4 days, some people even a week. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing you do, you're going to arrive in Munich and you're going to, by about noon, you're going to start getting a little dozy. That's just the way
Mm-hmm.
it is. So this is to just trick your body and get your biological clock advanced to being on the new time.
Yeah, just jump starting those circadian rhythms into
right.
the new structure. So
Then it goes into athletics. Okay. Now you have all these athletes. So you've got in collegiate sports, you've got all the conference realignment, right? Everybody now is traveling more than they ever did.
mm-hmm.
Pro teams. Last year, there were 6 games overseas for the NFL. This year, there's 9 games. The commissioner, Goodell, he wants 15 or 16 games within 5 years overseas. Okay. So that's a lot. It's a lot of traveling. Yeah. Professional golfers, tennis players, skiers. I mean, it's crazy. And I put the human charger on a number of the athletes that I know over here in the skiing world and made a huge impact on their travel back and forth between the US mm-hmm. and Europe.
And their performance, I'm sure.
It does because, timing is everything in athletics,
mm-hmm.
And not every team has the opportunity to travel to a destination and basically decompress in 2 or 3 days and either start training again. It's too hard on the body physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember the days even when I was at the University of Colorado and skiing for them, we would be at a training camp in Europe. We'd come back and we'd have to give our bodies at least a couple days before we started training hard again because you felt horrible. You felt like you had the flu.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, everyone's different. Not everyone reacts the same way, but most people suffer it. It's a challenge.
So you kind of went into how the device actually works, and you touched a little bit on the different protocols for different demographics. Specifically, you kind of went into the protocol for the night shift workers. How did you come up with those specific protocols? And then what's kind of the main difference between the different protocols for your different demographics?
Yeah, it's a good question because some of the protocols were done early on by the scientists and the engineer who developed the product. But keep in mind, Europe is, within 2 to 3 time zones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's like New York to the Rocky Mountains, sort of. And so there wasn't a big sort of focus on jet lag and things like that. But they did a lot of studies and they determined what it would take with the amount of light that you'd get from the human charger and they developed some protocols for that. And that was relatively easy. Normally if you were a person with SAD, you would use it first thing in the morning. And consistency is really key. It's not a sometimes thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that if you're suffering from something, you're not going to take, and the doctor prescribes some kind of how do I say it's a loss of word?
Some kind of medication.
Some kind of medication. I'll just say medication. And it's a 10-day dose, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to take it for 2 days and then,
right.
I'm not going to take it for another couple of days, right? You want to keep the consistency
mm-hmm.
because something is wrong in your circadian rhythm that doesn't allow you to process the darkness. Okay. So you need to be more like you wake up, you're ready to go. And some
mm-hmm.
people don't have that. We're all different. We're all built differently. So they knew that if you use the human charger when you wake up, within about 15, 20 minutes, you're awake. You're ready to go. It's a weird phenomenon. It's strange until you really use it and understand it. It's a little bit strange. And I'll give you a good example. We have some coaches here in Europe that have to travel long distances with some of the athletes. Okay. Whether it's
mm-hmm.
just in the Alps or it's going up to Scandinavia to train or whatever. And oftentimes they'll drive. And, in the afternoon, it's like anybody that drives any long distance, you're going to get punchy driving the car. So the first thing you do is you pull off, you go get an espresso or you fire up a energy drink and but there's going to be a crash about an hour later. And then
Yeah.
you're going to be fighting it again. These guys are like, man, I don't know what this is, but this thing is great. You put it in 12 minutes, and about 15, 20 minutes after that, you're just awake. You're wide awake. It's not like you're awake, and it doesn't die off. It keeps you awake. So they really like it for that, which makes a lot of sense. So those types of things, so for seasonal depression, you could use it 2 or 3 times a day if you want to. And a lot of people will like to use it in the afternoon because it saves them money. They don't have to go to Starbucks and pay $5 for a Frappuccino or something. So that's kind of the average. Those protocols were easy to come up with. Jet lag, trickier deal. Okay. Because you got people going to Europe, you got people going to the Middle East or to Asia. And we had to sit down and develop those kind of on our own. And we did some of it a little bit by trial and error. And we did some by looking at the timetables of flights in general directions. And all of a sudden, it just dawned on us. It's really, really simple. No matter where you go in the world, you want to start using it at the destination time zone. Okay. So for example, if you're sitting in Chicago and you're going to catch a flight to Munich, okay, you're going to leave probably in that maybe 4:00 in the afternoon sort of time frame, or even it could be 4 in the afternoon to 8 at night or whatever. The destination time zone is still dark. You're not going to use it until it gets to be, first thing you do is set your clock or your watch or your phone to the destination time zone. And then you set 4 to 5 alarms every 2 hours from that point. So I'll get on the airplane, and we were just back in the States. So on the way back, I set my phone to 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 4 o'clock. Okay. And every time the alarm goes off, I throw the human charger on, hit the button, it runs for 12 minutes, shuts off. And each time it just advances. And we found that you really only need it for like 2 days. Sometimes maybe a little bit more, but generally 2 days. If you're going from Munich back to the States, you might even start using it. The destination time zone might be mid-flight. So you would start using it then. So you just follow that. And the same with Asia. And once we were able to determine that and develop that protocol, it was really easy. We had a guy from a financial company in LA. He called me just before Christmas and he said, I want to buy a human charger for my CEO who's going to Taiwan for Christmas. And I said, great. And we got it to him on time. And about, I don't know, it was a couple weeks after Christmas. I reached out to him and I said, well, did he like it? And he goes, yeah, he loved it. And he says, now I've got to be in the Philippines next month and I need one because I want to use it. And so, he bought one and we got it to him right away. And he was actually working the night shift in the Philippines as a night trader. And he said it was fantastic. He said it was great. He said, I don't think I could have gone without it. He said it made all the difference in the world. And going to Asia is a tough one.
It is. That's a hard flight.
Yeah, I've done
transition.
That for like 20 years. In between my ski careers, I was manufacturing products, and I was always flying into either China, Taiwan, or Indonesia, and it's a bugger.
Yeah, it's difficult. It makes sense though that you would start in the destination time zone because you're really what you want to do is jumpstart your circadian rhythms on the correct time zone. So getting those circadian rhythms going, and like to your point, you have to have that consistency to create that rhythm. If you don't have that consistency, you don't get the rhythm. So it makes sense. It makes sense. So you have spent your career coaching elite athletes, Olympic level athletes. How has that world kind of shaped the way you think about this product?
Well, in athletics, I mean, I call it the 0.01 advantage because in my world of ski racing, oftentimes races are won by a hundredth of a second, 0.01. It comes down to that. Any event that's timed, I think, is really challenging, whether it's triathlons or bike racing or running or skiing or whatever. I mean, it's complex. So everyone's looking for an edge. They're looking for something that can give them an edge. And of course, now with doping control, if you're on the podium in an event, like in an individual event, like our ski racers, and you're on the podium in a major championship, you're going to pee in a cup. That's just the way it is. So you have to be really careful about what you take. And most of the athletes are, but every now and then you'll get an odd one out there. It just happened a little over a year ago where the Polish tennis player Iga Swiatek was taking melatonin and it was tainted. And of course,
Wow.
it showed up when she peed in a cup. And of course, she's got to hire attorneys to fight the deal. And WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, was all over. And, these cost her a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they can't take those risks. So we look for things that can help holistically and provide an advantage, for ski racers like us. Okay. So I'll give you a typical scenario. So we're training in Copper Mountain, Colorado in November generally. And the light is, it's winter light, starting to be a little bit more. The clock has changed. So, but it's not as bad as the first World Cup race or the second World Cup race is in Levi, Finland, which happens to be just north of the Arctic Circle. So the sun comes up at about 10:30 in the morning, goes across the horizon and drops in at about 2:30 in the afternoon. So, and obviously the racing slope is lit, it's got great lighting, but it's still not the same because all of a sudden the athletes are thrown into this completely dark environment. And, one of the years I was with the ladies, we were going to Levy and I had this argument with the head coach. I said, he wants to go 3 days in advance of this race. And I said, you're crazy. So we got to go 5 days. I said, they can't adapt to light. And this is before I ever knew anything about the human charger, but I was smart enough to know what jet lag will do to an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, we can't afford to lose the training in Copper Mountain and all this sort of stuff. We're going to go 3 days in advance. I said, that's a big mistake. And of course, end of November, fly to Denver to Boston. We get to Boston. There are weather issues, so the flights are delayed. We didn't arrive in Levy until the night before the race. Everyone was absolutely hammered.
Yeah.
Okay. Completely hammered. And of course, our star athlete, Michaela Schifrin, has won this race 7 times.
Yeah.
To this point. But back then, she had won it already. And it was probably the worst race she'd had in that venue. I think she was 7th or 8th. Yeah. And of course, with a high profile athlete like that has a lot of endorsements and that's her bread and butter. And that cost her a lot of money. So I know if we would have had a product like the human charger, we could have helped that scenario.
Yeah.
Could it have made her win? Who knows? Okay. Yeah. Because it was really late when we arrived. But these are the kinds of things that athletes are starting to look at now. They're trying to find ways to enhance their performance holistically. They're being, we're monitoring everything, whether it's our sleep scores and what we put in our bodies nutritionally, and they measure the data on the training performances. There's all this stuff now is going really deep, and you have to at that level. That's the way it is.
Right.
We had a dozen players from 49ers use it when they went to London last year.
Cool.
Because it's a long flight from San Francisco to London.
It is. Yeah. I mean, when you're at that high of a level, a 1% difference is huge. It's monumental. And I think when you look at any of the high performers in athletics, but also those that are just like really focused on biohacking and longevity, a device like this that really takes that hacking to the next level really helps, increase that performance by that amount that they need in order to succeed. So I think that's great that you've formed this. I do want to shift a little bit and talk about the business side, because launching an established European product into a brand new market is its own challenge. So kind of walk me through what the customer journey looks like right now. How does someone in the US typically discover Human Charger and then decide to try it?
That's a $1 million question, isn't it? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough one because first of all, it's a product that nobody has ever seen before. And that's oftentimes, unless you've got an enormous amount of money to use in marketing and advertising, it's really a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even more than that, it's the education side. Because if you walked out onto the street, I can almost guarantee that if you asked 10 people about their circadian rhythm, they'd look at you cross-eyed and go, "What's that?" Because most people don't know what their
Mm-hmm.
circadian rhythm is. And they don't know that they have a biological clock. They have no clue. Because again, it goes back to what we were talking about with technology has come so quickly that nobody can figure out why they feel the way they feel today,
Mm-hmm.
why they're so depressed, why the kids are all depressed. They're starting to figure it out with all this social media stuff, and they're trying to pull back on that a bit. But I think the hardest part is educating people the fact that you need light for your body to operate and function properly. And that means not only using something like the Human Charger, but it also means pulling back on using stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you can kind of defeat the purpose. You could use the Human Charger, but then if you're going to doom scroll all night long, sitting in bed till midnight, that's not going to help either. So, this one's sort of an easy one. You don't have to stop using it. But if
Mm-hmm.
you use the blue light blocking glasses, that totally changes it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just technology, and you got to try to keep up with it somehow. So I think the biggest challenge for us has been the education side of it, which is what we're really focused on. And, and it's going to take some time before people really start to understand, wow, that could really be a big help.
Right. So, what has been your primary way of kind of building that awareness, or giving that education? Has that been through like your coaching network, content, direct outreach? Are there specific groups that you speak to at like hospital staff or frequent travelers?
It's been a combination of B2C, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and B2B. B2B is a challenge. I won't sugarcoat it. I mean, this device should be used by every nurse and every doctor that operates in a hospital. But if you try to reach, and a lot of it's been this consolidation in America of all these healthcare providers are
Mm-hmm.
all they're now such big corporations.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get to the gatekeeper or through the gatekeeper to the right person, and they look at it as secondary. But if you look at nurses today, and God bless them, because if it wasn't for nurses that help keep us operating, you know, but they're probably some of the most unhealthy people on the
Mm-hmm. For sure.
because they're subjected to working these hideous hours at night under not proper lighting, not eating well enough. I mean, it's a
Right.
really, really, really tough profession. I feel horrible for them. But yet these corporations are doing nothing to help them. So I was on the phone with a gal yesterday who came referred to me, and her husband is an executive with Genesis, which is a high-end version of Hyundai.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, this is the kind of thing that they could introduce to their works, to their staff, and it would make an enormous impact on their well-being. Some of these companies will spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars building gyms and, Pilates rooms or yoga rooms or whatever in their buildings. They could spend a fraction of it to give everyone one of these that would help them enormously. So the B2B is a bit of a challenge. We're kind of working through that just by connections, because if we've tried some AI lead generation and things like this, but the problem is it's so generic that the gatekeepers see something that comes across their desk and they go, we don't know that person, we don't know that company, we don't, they just give them something that's pretty bland. And so we need to get to the right people, because it's not only the daily workers, but it's the C-suite executives who are flying all over the place. If their CEO, and more importantly, if their CFO knew the millions of dollars that are lost in productivity from jet lag, they'd absolutely go bonkers. It's huge, and they're not doing anything about it. And we're starting to get a little bit of headway into some of these C-suite executives, because they're the ones that are traveling a lot overseas, and that does make a difference. On the B2C side, direct to consumer, we changed our website to a Shopify site, which is going to be linked to TikTok, and we're going to use the content creators to help us reach that demographic, because I think one of the, and I can't take responsibility for this. I was talking to a gal in Canada, and I believe she was about to have her second child. And she was saying, oh my God, this is for moms. This is a mom's product right here, because moms, and my wife and I have 2 kids. So we know this problem, and those early years when moms don't get a lot of sleep, and they, this is a game changer for them. But that's the avenue for the moms, is to go through that sort of content creator type, because they'll listen to somebody that says, hey, I'm a mom, this is what I use, this made all the difference in the world, yada, yada, yada. Right.
Yeah.
So we've had to be kind of creative. The mother company, which is based in Denmark, it's not in Finland anymore, it's in Denmark now.
Okay.
They'll do quite a bit of advertising on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helps drive some of the business in the SAD season, which is the September through February.
Right.
And I'm focused more on the education part of it. I'm developing a lot of materials for education, some personal guides. I call them playbooks because I'm a coach, right? But these are playbooks that everybody that gets a human charger gets a playbook that understands how to use the device for a specific sort of
No,
event.
Those are really, really important to provide people with, and really breaking it down in a way that they can easily, and not only easily understand it, but easily implement it. I did a lot of that with a previous company where I implemented a lot of psychology just in creating that habit, because if you keep that habit going, then you're going to have, greater success with whatever you're working on, because you're using it as it's intended and you're using it consistently. So I think that's great that you're providing those playbooks. So beyond the mechanics of the device, what does it actually look like for someone, a nurse coming off of a week of night shifts, or someone adjusting to a drastic time zone change? When their body clock finally resets, what changes for them day to day?
They feel normal. They feel like they would normally, if it's a traveler, they'll feel the same as when they left, which is what you want. I mean, the only thing to cure jet lag, and then there's really no cure for jet lag, this is mitigating the symptoms probably more drastically than anything I've ever seen over the years. People advise, well, you arrive and then go take a nap or something, which is the kiss of death, because if you take a nap, then you're still staying on the old time.
Yeah.
And that'll screw you up even worse. And then you're fighting it for a week. Some take melatonin the night. They don't really need to do that. So it's, you want to try to feel as normal as you possibly can. We have a client who's got a really cool business. Okay. He builds private jets for people. Okay. And he's in Vancouver. He's a great guy. I reached out to him on a whim. He thought it was interesting, or his assistant thought it was interesting, and he was a little dubious at first, but got him a human charger, and he absolutely fell in love with it. And he flies. He'll go from Vancouver to Vienna, and then to London, and then he'll come back to Montreal. Then he'll go to Singapore, and he comes back. He said it's been an absolute godsend. So he bought it. He bought a human charger for everybody in his company.
Oh, very cool.
And he basically goes to Boeing or Airbus and Bombardier, and he buys the tube. He buys a fuselage. That's all he buys.
Yeah.
And then he fits the whole thing out based
Very
on
cool.
whatever it's an individual company or whatever. And he swears by the thing. He said it is, when I land in a place and I go into a business meeting, which is generally right away, I don't have a lag. I don't drag. And if I am a little bit, I throw it on, and 15, 20 minutes later, like my coaches that are driving around Europe, he's just awake, which means he's on his game, not going to make some stupid mistake in the boardroom. And yeah, it's really hard to, I don't know, maybe people are old school, or they have their own preconceived ideas, but at this stage of my life, I don't know if I would have taken on a product like this, really, but it works so good. And I still want to help athletes. And it's pretty remarkable, actually, that sometimes the simplest thing is the easiest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. So let's zoom out for just a moment and think about the space in general. So where do you think light therapy as a category, where do you think it's headed? It's grown steadily each year, but where do you think where do you think it's headed?
I think it's totally in its infancy. I mean, the biohacking world, right? And it's full right now of a lot of red light therapy. Which I think has some of it's really valid, some of it's not so much. Some of it's dangerous, some of it's way too powerful. We're fortunate that, bright light therapy is pretty docile. It's tame. It doesn't provide any real effects, other than it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Right.
Biologically. Red light therapy, there's some of it that's too powerful that can affect the skin and other things. We also have another product that we bundle with the human charger that's called the Jazz Band. It's kind of a funny name, but it's a guy out of Denver, Colorado, developed a system that uses red light, infrared light, magnetics, and vibration. And he actually patented, and there are a lot of people right now that are kind of infringing on his red light therapy, but he's patented a way for the red light plus the infrared, the magnetics, and the vibration to enhance DNA to regenerate tissues. And it's wild, because whatever injury you've had, this thing it's one of the best things we've ever seen. And we've had a number of athletes use it, and it found that it's great. In fact, the first person that we tried it on he's a FedEx pilot who had some shoulder surgery, and he was taking 1,200 milligrams of ibuprofen a day.
Wow.
Because shoulder surgery is pretty painful. And he was like 3 days in, and he's like, I just don't want to be on this much ibuprofen. But he says it's so damn painful. So anyway, we got him one of the Jazz Bands, and he called me in 2 days and said, oh my God, I'm down to 100 milligrams a day. He said, it's fantastic. And basically what it does is the guy figured out the harmonics of what your DNA, when you get hurt, okay, if you turned around and banged your elbow on the back wall there, you'd all of a sudden have a sore elbow, okay, because your DNA rushes right to it with blood and other parts of the body that help try to heal it and protect it, right? That's just the basic physiology. And what he was able to do is figure out how to accelerate the healing of DNA, and it's worked fantastic. It works really well.
That's fascinating. It just makes me think of there are some ancient cultural practices of people like actually screaming, like touching a wounded area on someone, like someone that's been bumped, not like a wound, but like a bump, and screaming into that area to heal it as like it's a cultural practice, but it's similar in the vibrations and like kind of hitting some kind of rhythm that, it's fascinating how sometimes you see science come back around to some older practices and advance in different ways. But that's a very cool story. So you have other devices on your site, correct?
We don't yet, but we will. We're going to have the jazz band put on it
Okay.
so that it's a bundle. It'll come with or without the human charger.
Okay.
And we felt it was really important because, one is basically for cognitive health. The other one is for, it's more of a rehabilitation or regeneration of
Right.
tissues. So we've kind of covered the spectrum, and we tested it last year on a lot of the ski racers because our sport is ridiculous. I mean, we're always banged up, and
Yeah.
you don't come out of that event without getting
Something. Yeah.
something. So it's been an eye opener to be able to see products like this,
Mm-hmm.
pardon the pun, come to light, because I think the sky's the limit. I think we're going to see
Yeah.
more and more of that, and I think it's good because honestly, the medicinals are not good for people. People are taking way too much medication. I wrote a book. I just finished a book.
Awesome.
I'm hoping to have it published before Christmas. That's my goal. And it basically came out of one of those Netflix documentaries on Purdue Pharma that was, doing the OxyContin thing
Mm-hmm.
and convincing people that they should never live their lives in pain. It should always be pleasure.
Yeah.
That's great, but that's not realistic, right? It's just the way it is. And I was blown away. Why are people dying because they're taking
Mm-hmm.
medication for pain when after my sports career where I've been so banged up, and you just kind of get used to it and you know how to mitigate it and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes live with it. And so I wrote this book on pain.
That's awesome. Yeah, and pain. I mean, our bodies have pain for a reason. It's to alert us that we need to change something or do something to recover.
There you
I
go.
try to explain that to my son. He's a basketball player, and there are lots of injuries that come with that when you're performing and you're working out in a gym 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day at age 13. Like, you're going to have some different injuries that you really have to take care of your body, and Advil's not always the answer. So
No, it's not, and he's at a tough age, because oftentimes they don't want to try new things. They don't want to eat the kind of right stuff that an athlete in that 18 to 21 range has to start really looking deep into that sort of thing. I was this gal I was talking to yesterday that her husband works for Genesis. Her son is 16 now, and he has aspirations to play D1 volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
And he's getting more to that age where he's really starting to pay attention to certain things in the body and how he has to manage, his training and I, obviously I offered my help because that's what I do now.
Right.
I take the tweeners. I call them tweeners because they've been really good up to a certain point to like 16, 17, 18 years old, but then they plateau and they don't, how do I get up to that elite level,
Right. Yeah.
And this is where, it takes developing a process where they are very, very structured and disciplined on how they do everything in their life. And that's always the trick. They got to give up a lot, right? And so, yeah, that's a tough one. But little things like this, like the human charger, they come into play. And because
they make that little tweak that, can sometimes push you over the edge to win. So it's so important with high performing athletes. Okay, so let's jump into our final piece here, which is the lightning round. So these are quick questions, quick answers, and then we'll close out. So, what is one myth about light therapy or seasonal affective disorder that you would like to eliminate if you could?
that a person wouldn't experience it. I think there are a lot of people out there that experience it that don't want to admit that they have it.
Right.
I think there are a lot of people, and I think it's more prevalent today, especially with young kids, because of all of this blue screen stuff. Boy, if you
Right.
can keep the phone away from the 13-year-old, boy, that's you've got a big win there. It's
Then
not
it'll
really keep
prevent
it
that.
away. It's just
Yeah.
pay attention. That's really key. And I think that myth is sort of caught up with everybody. They're like, what happened? Why are we so screwed up? Why do we feel like we feel? That's because of light.
True, 100%. What is one habit or mindset that has helped you grow, whether it's in coaching or in business?
I'm very disciplined structure, very methodical about just about everything I do, and I guess it comes from the athletic side. When I was an athlete, it's you got to get up, you got to hydrate, you got to eat the right foods. You go out and you train, and it's this structure of everything's
Mm-hmm.
disciplined, and it's little things. It's getting out of bed, making your bed, make it perfectly, then get dressed, and you go and hydrate 40 ounces of water. And you do all these things, right? You have a routine, a warm up routine, a stretching routine. You have all this stuff. That to me is absolutely paramount to success, whether you're a business person or you're an athlete. You have to have that.
Yeah, structure and consistency. I love that. So 5 years from now, where do you see light-based therapies sitting inside both performance world and everyday healthcare?
Well, I think it'll be a big part. I really do. I think people will become more aware of the wrong blue light that they're getting, and they're going to start going,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I need a little help with this, or I need to pull that back a little bit. I think they've only scratched the surface. I think there's a lot of that. Pharmaceuticals still have their place, but I would hope that light therapy can curb a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
excess use. Thank God medications are becoming more expensive, so hopefully that helps too. But I just think I hope in 5 years that we're all living much healthier, more productive lifestyles, because
Yeah, I do too. So last question in the lightning round, very simple. Where can we find and learn more about Human Charger for our listeners?
yeah, they can visit our website, humanchargerusa.com.
Okay. And we'll
And
include that in the show notes for sure. And then we will, as soon as your book is up for grabs, we will update the show notes so that we have a link to your book as well. If you'll send that to us when you get that published.
yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
So awesome. So Gary, I really I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank you also for I have a Human Charger now. I am very appreciative of it. I've enjoyed incorporating that into my morning meditation routine. So I've really enjoyed using the product. So thank you for being here with us and for spearheading this U.S. Implementation of the Human Charger and introducing it to us here in the U.S. And I also appreciate your time today talking with us.
Thank you very much, Nancy. It was a pleasure to be on here.
Great. If you'd like to learn more about innovations in health, wellness, and longevity space and how these businesses are growing, make sure to like and subscribe to the Practice Pulse. And please check out Gary's device and all of that it embodies. We will include a link to that in the show notes, and we encourage you to check it out. And also probably stay tuned for some TikTok videos of how it's affecting different users in that space as well. So thanks again, Gary. Remember, innovation creates possibility, implementation turns it into growth. We'll see you next time.